Thank you, Mika, for the kind introduction. It was kind of very fast, so we're speeding up now in order to save the time for the coffee break. When Louis asked me last year to come here and speak about the fourth industrial revolution, I thought, yeah, that's kind of a good idea to do that. And when I realized it's in France, I said, yeah, that's the best place. Because, you know, I'm from Germany, and for us, France is the home of revolution. So I'm trying to shed some light from an economics perspective on that issue. So I want to give you a short overview of what I'm going to tell you. I want to shed some light on three different questions. The first is revolution number 4 really so different from the revolutions in industry that we've seen before in the last couple of centuries and decades? The second question is that really going to be a big challenge or a tremendously large challenge? And of course, it's a tremendously large challenge that we are facing and which is on the doorstep now. And finally, how can you, in your specific roles, being a CEO or doing business development within innovation hubs or science parks, how can you assist small, medium-sized enterprises and startups in that situation? So this is basically the story, what I'm going to tell you. So, the fourth industrial revolution, I know that a couple of people have a lot of anxieties when looking at it. However, if we have a look at number 1, 2, and 3 from the last centuries, like mechanization, steam power, electricity, computer, and automation, from an economics perspective, they are entirely positive in terms of net wealth increased, income improved, the standard of living got better, and especially the life of more or less everyone on this planet became easier. So from that perspective, I think we can moderately look optimistic at the fourth industrial revolution being ahead. However, there's a couple of challenges, and I want to highlight some of them. So first of all, whenever we're talking about technological opportunities, from an economics perspective, and I'm an economist, so I can only tell you my perspective, I'm not deep into technology or IT, etc., then typically we look at it identifying S-shaped curves. And you see an S-shaped curve here on the left-hand side from the last industrial revolution. And we're now in the process being in the stint of 2015 to 2025, where we try to identify whether the next wave will be a sustaining scenario or a disruptive scenario. If it's a sustaining scenario, then typically most of the firms in markets and industries are able to survive. They will adapt to new technologies, they will learn about it, they will build absorptive capacity and introduce new technologies into their skill set. However, if it's a disruptive scenario, then we are running into what might be a churchyard or cemetery for firms. Firms will pass away and there will be new firms. And to give you some idea where we as economists think we're standing, have a look at this page here. This is 2 waves of digitalization. And we're currently in the first one on the left-hand side, which I call the complementary and transformative wave. So it was rather optional for most of the firms to decide whether they go from offline to online. And just a number from last week from the newspaper in Germany is 65% of all the firms in retail business in Germany decided not to go online as of today. They are still only offline. So it was optional. It was not mandatory. And of course, most of the firms have been able to survive, not doing Web 2.0, not doing digital processes, not creating apps for smartphones. However, the next wave will be disruptive and replacing. Topics that are coming up are like platforms, ecosystems, big data, predictive analytics, and artificial intelligence. And you need to adapt to these topics and themes, because otherwise your firm will disappear. In a sense, for innovation hubs and technological supporters like you are, you need to be aware of that the demand of these firms will change dramatically. You need to support them so that they find a new way into that second paradigm of a disruptive replacing digital wave. So summing up everything that we know so far about industrial revolutions, we might use that framework here. It summarizes for the first 3 not digital, but industrial revolutions, the patterns or the focus and objectives in order to create competitiveness. And what you see is that along the dimensions of automation, process, competitive advantage, etc., over the last couple of decades, things changed a lot. And we can only speculate a little bit about the fourth industrial revolution, but what we know so far, what we see at the horizon, is that automation will focus definitely not on control anymore, which is today the main topic. It will be on decision making. In terms of process, as of today, we focus on information. So information is at the very core if we try to optimize processes. In the near future, it will be knowledge. So knowledge will be more important here. Competitive advantage will come out of connectivity. No more of like coordinating value chains and improving the process structure of your production. With that, organizations will be more open, and just combining connectivity and openness of organizations and the competitive advantage measure, what we'll see pretty likely is that we have blurring ecosystems. So blurring ecosystems means that we are not able to identify industries, firms, and markets anymore in the near future. So whatever you take as granted as of today, like automobile industry, telco, a specific firm, a specific skill, will disappear, or at least there will be a foggy situation in the years to come. So you have to navigate yourselves, but especially your clients, through that foggy situation. And finally, the mode of governance will change a lot from what we have today, contracts with the people that work for your firm, or contracts with B2B situations, your customers, your collaborators, into more or less spontaneous projects. So my advice here would be that you should add up or center your activities all around these new patterns on the right-hand side under revolution number 4, in terms of decision-making, etc., in order to improve the probability that your organization and, of course, your clients might survive that next stage. I have been talking now a little bit about disruption, so I think it's kind of important to have a precise understanding of what disruption really means. And from an economics perspective, it has 2 basic requirements. The first requirement is actually that the disruptive innovation, whatever it might be, technology or something else, destroys existing knowledge. And in addition to that, it needs to destroy existing customer relationship. If one of these requirements is missing, then we, from an economics perspective, we're talking about revolutionary innovations or other types of innovation, niche creation, etc. But if these 2 requirements are fulfilled, then it's a disruptive innovation, definitely. If that is happening, then typically the competitiveness is shifted towards new firms, towards startups, so they become better positioned in the competitive situation. And as a consequence, typically some of the startups, some of the new firms are able to drive market leaders, incumbent firms, out of the market. So this is the basic scenario of disruption. And we see that a lot as of today if you look at Uber, at Netflix, at Airbnb, at Booking.com, etc., in a very fast manner, displacing incumbent firms and revolutionizing whole industries. So when it comes to disruption and digitalization, we can identify 3 main, let's say, drivers or levers for disruption, which are big data, artificial intelligence, and platforms. I'm not drilling too deep into technological insights here, but just to give you an idea from an economics perspective, what does big data mean? Big data means that you use data that comes from outside your organization. So that's not coming from marketing, from sales, from controlling department, but coming from the market, from your competitors, from Google, from Facebook, etc., and you incorporate that data into your decision making. If that is true, as a direct consequence, we have blurring industry and market boundaries. So we can't really say you are in the automobile industry. Just to give you a good example, just last week ended the International Automobile Fair in Frankfurt, and years ago it was the Automobile Fair. Today it's the Mobility Fair, because automobile firms are no more in the automobile industry. They are now moving on into something else. Artificial intelligence means, to me, and from an economics perspective, that you have algorithms that help you identifying options for decision making. In the near future, with evolutionary algorithms, it might be that it's not only options, but that the computer, that the algorithm is taking over and doing the decision making for you. If that is true, your organization and pretty much just the routines that you have in your organization are obsolete. You don't need a firm anymore, and you don't need a manager anymore, and you need to come up with solutions for that. And the last point here, platforms based on direct or indirect network effects with Amazon, with Uber, etc., lead to the fact that typically most of the firms currently serving products or doing services to B2B, B2C customers are losing their business model. So they have to redefine themselves and either join a platform, an existing platform, or come up with a known platform and try to establish what we call an ecosystem there. So if that is all true, and I at least believe that it's true because we have very good scientific support for that from a lot of studies from a lot of countries, then the big question is, how shall you deal with it? And what could be, as I call it, a roadmap for innovation hubs for the next maybe 10 years? So first of all, you have to realize, you see here on that picture, is that approximately 70% of all R&D efforts are currently running into what we call exploitation of the existing business model. So you try to deepen your knowledge that you already have, to improve it, to optimize it. Another 15% approximately go into product development and another 10% into process development. And only 5% are, as of today, going into what we call exploration, which means looking for new horizons in the sphere of the fourth industrial revolution. If that is true, and the aforementioned issues are true as well, then one first task is actually to shift efforts, to shift R&D expenditures towards exploration to better understand the new horizons, the new boundaries of your industries, of your markets, and your firms. That's very important. The second thing, which is very important, I'm talking a lot to owners and managers of SMEs, is digitalization is not IT. Whenever I'm talking to them, they ask me, Markus, shall I invest in hard or in software? And my typical answer is you should invest in people. People is much more important than hardware or software because people drive digitalization. They look for solutions, they create solutions, and that will be true and remain true in the 2 or 3 decades to come. No one knows what happens in 2050 or later, but for today, it's very important that big data, AI, and platforms are just the levers or the driving forces behind digitalization. But you need to come up with solutions that are based on new work scenarios, on collaboration, on free and freemium business models, on convergence, and especially on personalization of services and products, which is much more important. So digitalization is, of course, aligned with IT solutions, but it's not based on them. So, how's the situation in Germany? This is just a pretty short snapshot of what we can see how firms deal in Germany with the new challenges from the fourth industrial revolution. First of all, on the left-hand side, on the top, you see the large firms in Germany, and you see a couple of familiar names probably, Siemens, Lufthansa, etc., are setting up what we call innovation hubs. Typically, these innovation hubs deal with digital issues, and typically they are located far away from the headquarters because they want to make sure that the ideas that they create are not killed by senior managers from the existing business during lunchtime, probably, or during having a coffee break. So not all firms are large firms. The smaller ones, SMEs, are typically trying to get in touch with innovation hubs, with technology parks, with science parks, and we have a network now in Germany. This is not the full picture here, but gives you some idea of how it's organized, because they say we can't deal with it on our own. This is basically driven by the current situation in the business cycle. Capacity is pretty much filled with existing business, so people do not have too much time to think about things in terms of big data and AI, so universities might help a lot. If that is a picture that you agree on, then as a consequence, on the right-hand side, there follows a little bit of action for you needed. As I understand, and I have been talking to a couple of you yesterday, more or less everyone is aware now that you should leave your old business model in order to provide infrastructure and location, and you need to enhance it by providing services for R&D, for business development, doing a little bit of acceleration and incubation, and of course providing access to funding and finance. And maybe if you, let's say, accompany the firms into the market later on, there might be a mode of consulting these firms once they're in the market. Because what I think is necessary, you and your clients need to monetize on innovation. And I have been talking to some of you, and even today, what is your main KPI? And more or less everyone came up with a KPI that is, I count projects, or I count square meters, or I count something else. It's all input. So probably what is necessary for you is to translate these inputs into outputs and come up with a couple of very good KPIs that might guide your business into a profitable future that helps to create benefits for your clients in a better, even better way. So, summing up a little bit, what do I think are the strategic challenges that are at the doorstep if we're running into the fourth industrial revolution now? I just want to mention 6 of them, which are highlighted a little bit here on that slide. So the first is what we see is new price wars within the digital situation. So, it's working again. Typically, there's a lot of products out there, a lot of services, mainly apps as of today, but later on it will be other services as well, that are offered for free and forever. So Google would never ask you to pay money for search. Facebook would never ask you for paying for the membership. Of course, they use your data, and of course, you own the data that you give to them, but they will never create revenue out of the original service. They will always have some additional complementary service that is able to create revenues. And whenever I'm talking to the owners or managers of SME corporations, and I say, okay, what will be your product that you offer for free forever in the near future in order to get in touch with new customers, in order to build relationships, in order to create an ecosystem that is viable in the digital future. The second thing is you need to think about the fact that typically ecosystems and multi-sided markets lead to a situation where the winner takes it all. So probably hardly anyone in the room here can name the second largest competitor to WhatsApp. Because typically the market leader in a multi-sided market takes approximately 100% market share, and as a matter of fact, the rest is approximately 0. So you need to decide whether or not to join an existing platform or to compete and provide an own platform and collaborate with your competitors or maybe suppliers and customers. And you already know that, and some of you are pretty aware of it, there's a new war for talents, not only because the business cycle globally had been fundamentally great during the last decade, but especially there's a new generation of people coming up, just leaving the universities now, looking for a different style of life, work-life patterns, etc., and they have different expectations in terms of remuneration and style of work. So you need to come up with a solution for that. Another thing which is very important, most new competitors that you will see will come from outside your industries, like GAFA, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and a lot of others from China, maybe Tencent, etc. So please be aware that the main competitors and aggressors or firms that are going to attack your business model are from outside your current industry and market. And then a very important point here is plug-and-play business models might take over. What does that mean? I have been talking about connectivity a little bit. What does connectivity essentially mean? Connectivity means that interfaces, which are currently a problem typically, won't be a problem in the near future. So plug-and-play means that you overcome the problem of interfaces by solutions that overlap. And firms that can create competitiveness out of connectivity will excel really on plug-and-play business models. And finally, we have cross-dimensional convergence, things like global versus local versus regional, physical versus digital, etc., will disappear, won't play a role anymore. So out of these 6 key strategic challenges, there are 6 management topics that you need to solve. The first couple in the top row are more or less connected with the question, should you do digitalization by yourself or should you delegate it? And of course, if you want to be a front runner, be successful with digitalization, you should definitely do it on your own. There's a question behind that, and I just had been talking to Rogelio before about Telefonica. And Telefonica in Germany, they had a CDO, a Chief Digital Officer, for the last 4 years. This guy stepped down, and the whole division is now integrated into the business because they realized, okay, digitalization is a joint effort of the board of the firm. It's not a single purpose, whatever person or division. It needs to be integrated in the whole process of delivering services and products to the firms. Then another question on the left bottom row, we see a lot of CEOs ask me, my customers are not ready yet for digitalization, so I have to wait for them. My typical answer here is, please don't wait. Please be a front runner. Don't wait for your customer. There's other customers that are already waiting for you in terms of digitalization. And if your customers are not ready, probably the customers will disappear as a customer in the next decade because everyone will be digital. In connection with that is the question, shall you increase or transform your portfolio? That'll mean, shall you take all the products and services that you have and digitalize them, or shall you build a new portfolio and then shift your efforts, your people, your organization into the new world? That depends a lot on the firm that you're in, the market that you're in, so there is no general answer to that. However, you have to come up with a solution to that for your organization and, of course, for your clients. And finally, an example from Germany again, should you integrate or separate the new business from the existing ones? A good example is Daimler-Benz. Daimler took over the business of Smart, the provider or a manufacturer of the small cars, and decided actively to build that car, the Smart car, in France. Not in Germany, not near Stuttgart, because they said, okay, if we build that small car next to the headquarters, typically a manager would come over and say, okay, this is not really a car, this is not really an engine, this is not like a Daimler should look like. And the only option for them was to do it somewhere else, and they are pretty successful. And we have a lot of examples in Germany where firms say, okay, we follow a greenfield approach, we go somewhere else in order to build new business that is not really connected to the old one. So, summing up what I've just mentioned, the fourth industrial revolution, from an economics perspective, will definitely shift from only my perspective from economics, not technologically, innovation towards open, knowledge-based, and cyber-physical systems. That's a matter of fact as far as we can see it now. Competitiveness will depend a lot more than today on artificial intelligence, which will be at the core for decision-making, at big data, which will blur industries, markets, and firms' boundaries, and on platforms. And what we see in the next years to come is what I call the second wave of digitalization, which is mandatory for everyone in all markets everywhere. So the action to be taken is probably for you and your clients to focus on exploration, not on exploitation, so not deepening knowledge, but creating new knowledge outside what you currently have, just looking beyond your nose and dipping into deep waters. Create business models that focus on connectivity, because I think connectivity will be the base for competitiveness in the near future. And finally, create new business models that adapt to all these things that are going to happen. So thank you very much for listening to me. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'm around for a couple of hours today and tomorrow, so whenever you have a question, just get in touch. Thank you very much.